We're now on BBC One, See Here.
Hello and welcome to See Here. In today's programme, Jack has a report about you and your MP. We have a report from Leipzig, where they recently held an international magic festival. And we have a film from Frank Barnes School. But first, a celebration. Since its launch 2 years ago, the revolutionary telephone relay service for deaf people, Type Talk, has grown immensely. When it was launched, it was handling calls from 2,000 customers. It now has some 12,000 customers and handles more than 15,000 calls a week. On Christmas Day alone, it handled 1,200 calls. A few weeks ago, it reached a significant milestone. We were invited to join the celebrations and went along to the presentation at the BT Tower here in London.
Hello. Alison's doing nice to meet you. The millionth call to Type Talk is a very, very significant milestone. Significant because it shows just how fast the service has grown in such a short time, and significant because we hope it will really encourage many other people to try and use this service. A service which has grown because of the partnership between BT and the RNID, which has been very, very successful, and we intend to develop even further into the future. We're going to invest £14 million over the next 3 years to grow the service. So we really encourage everyone to try it. It's a service we really are proud of.
Well, who would have thought that Type Talk would have reached its millionth call in 2 years? Great. The millionth caller was Alison Taylor, a deaf civil servant from Ruislip, who was looking for a house to buy. She used Type Talk to communicate with her solicitor and the estate agent before putting her offer in for the house. Before Alison was presented with her prize, a compact text phone, she took time to chat with Type Talk and to thank them for making her the millionth caller.
Must be about the money.
Type Talk made me feel very confident and independent when I felt another person looking information on my behalf. That person might not receive the right information from the hearing person. It's a specialised picture like mine, it's easy to call and contact my tutor with that, and to any hearing person which I need personal information from. Buying a house saves me time to go to the estate agent face-to-face about doing appointments, about mortgages. So I've used type talk regularly for the past 6 months, and I'm very not happy.
You've got to imagine that the telephone hasn't been invented to understand what it means to be profoundly deaf if you can't use a telephone. And that is what deaf people are faced with every day, or they were, until Type Talk was developed. And this has given them access to the telephone system, and they can now avoid all the discrimination that the lack of a telephone system made them subject to, especially in terms of jobs, because no employer can now say you can't have the job because you can't use a telephone. They can use a telephone at any time of the day and any time of the year.
Type Talk is going from strength to strength. So much so that a second exchange will be open during the summer. And See Here will be reporting on the new exchange in our next series. If you are deaf or hard of hearing and think that you would benefit from Type Talk services, it's very easy to join. All you need to do is register yourself as a user. So if you'd like to register to use Type Talk, the text phone number to ring is 0800 500 888.
Over the past 2 months, we've had the local council elections and the European elections for MEPs. And with some by-elections in the offing, we thought we'd take a look at what an MP does. Many of us are now familiar with the sight of MPs at work in the House of Commons. But this is only a small part of their job, as much of their time is spent in their local constituency.
Will the Prime Minister now admit?
You and your MP. Peter Bottomley is the Member of Parliament for Eltham, and he was elected in 1975. He's been a Minister at the Department of Transport and at the Northern Ireland Office. Well, I'm sure you deal with all kinds of problems, but what is the most common problem that you deal with?
Problems associated with poverty are the worst ones, whether it's help with a funeral. Well, those questions have gone away because the system now works better. There are problems with housing. What do you do with people who are living in bad housing, whether privately rented or social housing, where the landlord won't deal with the condensation? They keep saying it's the way you cook, it's the way you... excuses. There are people with heating problems. I've dealt with using the local council, using the government, a tower block built quite recently where the heating costs were very high. Mostly people living there were on income support. There the answer was not to give them more money, but to cut the cost of heating.
I've seen others in my life.
All normal?
No, that's so sad really, because he spent 29 years in the army and was given so much to his country.
And when you got me involved, were you frightened about getting the MP involved, or that's something?
No, I was born.
It's mainly to do with people's lives, their responsibilities to their parents, to their neighbours, to their children. It's household things, I think, which matter most to people.
Now, some MPs say that constituency work is the most rewarding of all, and others say that they weren't elected to be glorified welfare officers. Where do you stand?
I'm like a white line. I get run over by people in both directions. I think without the welfare work, how do we know what we're doing here? When I make a speech, I normally bring in examples from the last week's experience of my constituents. I also believe strongly there are big national and international issues. When there are free and fair elections in South Africa, when there are elections in El Salvador, countries which I know well, where I've been with people when they've been suffering, I know that there is more to Parliament than welfare work, but if you can't see the individual in a crowd, your eyes are not good enough.
Roughly, what proportion of your time do you spend on these constituency problems and on national and international problems?
It'll vary from constituency to constituency and what the MP's like. In my wife's constituency, many people there have got views. People living in her constituency run the country, and the ones who don't run the country think they run the country. So as well as problems, they have views. In my constituency, which is basically a Labour one, there's no party politics in helping people, but my constituency has more problems and fewer views. I try to work in my constituency during the week, and because it's a short distance, I can go and work there in the morning and be back at Downing Street or in a Whitehall department by 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Would she have come to see me without your help, do you think, or she?
But she didn't know you existed.
So people
didn't know.
people ought to help their neighbours. They ought to say,
yeah.
look, I'll come with you, or this is what you ought to do.
Yeah.
Should we cross over here?
See, a lot of people are sitting behind closed doors with
Yeah.
so many problems.
Well, to what extent are you influenced by your constituents' views on important issues?
I always think I ought to know what their views are, and if I vote against their views, I ought to explain why. The majority of my constituents want capital punishment. I know there have been too many wrong convictions. So if I speak about it, I say they want it, I don't, and I explain why. If 14 people say we don't want anyone to be allowed to shop on a Sunday, that should be a criminal offence, I will say 14 people out of 60,000 have spoken to me about this, but I'm going to vote for it because this, that and the other reason. If someone says to me, what can we do about the cost of energy? I will say, I will vote for privatisation of electricity or gas because that'll help to bring the price down. If I was a Labour Member of Parliament, I might say I'll vote against that because the government bring in VAT on fuel. So there's room for argument, debate, discussion. But as a Member of Parliament, I want to know how it affects my constituents. I also want to know their view, and I also want them to know they have a Member of Parliament who in the election address does not say, here are my promises, but I have a quotation from one constituent who wrote to me, Dear Mr. Bottomley, I have never voted for you, I never shall, but at least you reply to my letters.
Well, that was one example of the relationship between an MP and his constituents and his opinion of it. Now, the other MPs may well have different approaches and different opinions, but basically they're all dealing with the same kind of problems, and it's good for them and it's good for us to improve our understanding of that relationship, and it's also good for democracy.
Did you remember that from last year's Young Deaf Achievers Award ceremony? Well, preparations are now well underway for this year's award. Planning does take a long time. Earlier this year, we asked See Here viewers, particularly young viewers, to volunteer to reorganize the awards. They have been meeting and have come up with a number of suggestions. One of the questions asked was, why do so few deaf young people nominate their peers? There seem to be a number of answers. Information about the Young Deaf Achievers is not reaching the grassroots deaf. Advertising seemed to be aimed at hearing people rather than deaf people. And written nomination forms might put some people off. So all of these points have been taken into account, and what's been suggested is that there ought to be a BT-YDA roadshow. What's going to happen over the next few months is that publicity material, photographs and nomination forms are going to be taken to meetings and conferences of deaf, deaf-blind and hard of hearing people. The roadshow will be fronted by a young person who'll be able to promote the scheme. So look out for the roadshow. It could be somewhere near you between June and October. And don't forget that the prizes are quite large. The winners get £1,000, £500 and £250, so there's an incentive to be nominated. The address for nominations is coming up at the end of the programme. Well, magic has a fascination all of its own. And it's very difficult, even on camera, to spot how the trick is done. Because it's a very visual medium, we joined with our colleagues from Dover Film in Denmark to film the first Deaf Magicians Festival. And here's their report.
Here in the city, there's to be an international festival for deaf magicians. Tonight we're going to a gala party where all the best magicians will be. Now I would like to go there, but I don't think I'm appropriately dressed. So first, I'll change. See you there. Now that's what I call magic. See, I've completely transformed my image. Now here at the gala evening, the best magicians will be chosen. We'll see them later, but there's some really exciting acts.
Well, there are 39 magicians here taking part in this competition from all over the world. We've got people from England, from America, Canada, Germany, Iran, of all places. Amazing they managed to come. And Japan, we managed to get someone here from Japan, which was amazing. We had real problems getting them here, faxing each other backwards and forwards, and finally at the last minute someone arrived, and that was a real relief.
Und jetzt kommen wir zum Hauptpreis, dem Grand Prix. Nee, ich krieg den nicht. Den bekommen Rainer Schade und Horst Bormann.
For the past few years, here at the Museum of the Moving Image, deaf schools have been encouraged to make videos on a chosen topic. So we thought that this year we'd get in early and see the videos being produced. Frank Barnes School here in London chose to make a video about the Great Fire of London. And we went along to see these budding filmmakers in action. Well, the children have been working very hard. This project's been running for 6 weeks altogether. And they already know the story because the teachers have told them what it's going to be. And now what they're doing is changing the story into pictures, into a storyboard. One scene after another, so they know exactly what they're going to film before they do it. Now, what's happening in this one here? Now, put your hands up, please. Yes, you.
Oh, that's where the water gets thrown all over and people get soaked.
Okay, come on. Now, when I bang my foot on the floor and you feel that, can you feel it or hear it? I want you to look at me when that happens.
I think it's good for all children to have a challenge, providing they get some benefit from it. And I think in this case they've learnt new ways of expressing themselves because they're not allowed to sign, they're not allowed to use speech, they have to think how to express themselves in mime. Also, they've had to learn how to work cooperatively, so that's been a good experience as well.
But it's been very good. It means children can be creative and throw ideas in, what costumes to wear. They realise that they need to be very detailed on how to build out the characters of these rats.
think it's been a really valuable experience because they've been working with deaf adults, many of whom are highly skilled, so they've been excellent role models. Also, I think they've learnt a lot of the technical skills involved in filmmaking, and they've actually been able to realise that they can do those sorts of things as well. And it's given them, some of them, something to work towards for the future.
Terrific. Here's hoping that one day some of those children will be working for See Here as producers. If you want more information on how you can join in next year's project, the address is coming up shortly. Well, that's all for this week. Next week is our very own chat show. Please do join us. Bye-bye.